You were never meant to have a mate. Mary had heard the words so often they no longer felt like cruelty. They felt like doctrine, like something etched into marble and sealed beneath the moon's indifferent gaze. Tonight, they were spoken clearly, brightly, beneath the vaulted ceiling of the great hall. Lillian did not whisper. She didn't need to. The harvest convocation glittered around them in silver firelight. Crystal chandeliers rained fractured light across black and white marble floors polished to a mirror sheen. Gilded columns rose like sunlit trees toward frescoed ceilings painted with ancient wolves and celestial law. Cloaks of deep crimson, charcoal gray, and midnight silk moved in slow currents through the room. And everywhere, there were eyes. You were never meant to have a mate, Lillian repeated, on her smile elegant and lethal. The moon does not make mistakes twice. A few nobles nearby paused mid-conversation, not openly staring, never openly, but listening. Mary stood near one of the towering columns, fingers lightly brushing the cool stone behind her. She wore a gown the color of winter ash, no embroidery, no jewels, no family crest pinned to her shoulder. The silk was simple, unadorned, beautiful in its restraint, but painfully plain against the jeweled spectacle of the court. She had not been invited to the convocation as a hopeful. She had been summoned as a reminder. The only unmated daughter of the Crescent bloodline at 23. In a kingdom where bonds revealed themselves before 21, or not at all. Around her, daughters of powerful houses laughed beneath chandeliers carved from moonstone. On silver circlets rested in styled hair, wrists flashed faintly with half-formed mate marks, delicate crescents waiting to ignite at the right proximity. Each girl stood poised for destiny. Mary's wrist remained bare. The absence had become its own presence. You should have stayed in the archives, Lillian continued softly. At least there you're useful. Mary kept her chin level. I won't cause embarrassment, she said quietly. I'll remain out of sight. A small laugh escaped Lillian's lips, controlled, contained, practiced. You misunderstand, she replied. You are the embarrassment. The words landed without sharpness. That was the cruelty of it. They were not screamed. They were polished. Across the hall, her father stood among council members in dark ceremonial coats. He did not look toward her. Not once. His profile was stern, undignified, carved from the same stone as the columns, reputation before daughter. Near him, the court seer watched Mary with hooded eyes, measuring, judging, confirming what had long ago been declared. The moon had passed her over. Whispers coiled softly around the room. Poor thing. Such unfortunate blood. Half-lines are unpredictable. Mary had grown accustomed to invisibility. She worked in the court's administrative wing, cataloging treaties and managing correspondence no one else wished to sort. She was tolerated, not celebrated. Necessary, not cherished. Some wolves were born without the moon's blessing. Some bloodlines produced flaws. Some wolves were not chosen, Mary thought, steadying her breath. I was one of them. The acceptance did not sting anymore. It settled, heavy, permanent. She would endure the evening. I'll stand by the pillar, avoid spectacle, slip away before the final pairing ritual began. That was her talent. Endurance. The marble floor gleamed beneath flickering blue braziers, velvet brushed stone, gold thread caught flamelight. The air shimmered with perfume and ambition. And then, a subtle shift. It began as silence. Not total, not obvious, but a thinning of sound, like wind withdrawing before a storm. Across the hall stood a man in black. He had been there all evening, still, observing. King John, alpha of all packs, commander of the northern clans, the most powerful wolf in the realm. He had refused 12 noble daughters already. Each dismissal had been quiet, merciful, but final. The council's tension thickened with every declined alliance. He did not look frustrated. He looked patient. His coat was midnight black, hair fitted sharply across broad shoulders, the silver wolf crest of the high throne stitched at his back. He wore no crown. He did not need one. Power clung to him without ornament. The space around him seemed deliberately clear, as though even the air respected boundaries. Mary had avoided looking directly at him all evening. Until now. Her gaze lifted, and something inside her shifted. It was not pain. It was warmth. A thin line of heat traced beneath her skin, starting low at her collarbone and threading downward in a shimmering path she could not see but felt with startling clarity. Her breath caught. Her fingers curled slightly against the pillar. No, not now, not here. Across the hall, John's head turned. Their eyes met, the warmth intensified. Pulling, tightening, alive. The chandeliers flickered in her peripheral vision, and sound receded further, muffled by the thunder of her pulse. She pressed her palm to her chest. The thread pulsed. Alive. Impossible. And then, the Alpha King moved. He did not rush. He did not hesitate. He simply began to walk. Conversations faltered as nobles instinctively stepped aside. Silk and velvet parted like waves before a prow. The marble floor reflected his measured approach in fractured silver light. Mary's heart pounded against her ribs. Lillian's voice trailed off mid-sentence. Her father finally turned. The court seer straightened. Mary could not breathe. The heat flared brighter, racing toward her wrist. The bare, unmarked wrist she had long ago stopped checking. The room seemed to inhale, and the Alpha King began to walk toward her. If you think you know what's about to happen, you don't. I'll stay with this story, because the moon is about to rewrite everything. The Alpha King began to walk toward her. He did not raise his voice. He did not signal command. He simply moved, and the court obeyed. Velvet and silk parted instinctively. Nobles stepped aside without knowing they had chosen to. The black and white marble floor reflected his steady approach in fractured light. Conversations died mid-breath. Laughter thinned into nothing. Power was never declared. It moved. Mary felt it in the air. The shift, the tightening. The heat beneath her skin sharpened into a living current, racing from her collarbone down her arm. Her father had gone pale. The council members stiffened where they stood, dark coats rigid with sudden calculation. The seer's hooded gaze sharpened like a blade unsheathed. John stopped before her. Up close. Well, he was taller than she had imagined, not imposing in gesture, but inevitable in presence. His coat was cut in severe lines of midnight black, silver crest gleaming faintly between his shoulders. His expression was composed, but something ancient flickered in his eyes. The heat surged. "Your name," he said. The words were quiet. They did not need volume. "Mary of Crescent," she replied, forcing her spine straight against the pillar behind her. A beat passed. "You felt it." Not a question. The thread pulsed hotter beneath her skin, bright and undeniable. "Yes," she answered. His gaze did not waver. So did I. Around them, the silence thickened into something brittle. Mary swallowed. She could feel every eye in the hall pressing against her back. She had lived her life unseen. Now she stood at the center of the realm's attention. If this is a mistake," she said softly, steady despite the chaos inside her ribs, "it will destroy you." A murmur rippled faintly through the closest nobles. The Alpha King did not look offended. If anything, the corner of his mouth curved almost imperceptibly. "You think I would not know my own fate?" he asked. The heat flared sharply, racing toward her wrist. She did not answer. Slowly, deliberately, John lifted his hand. The movement was unhurried, controlled. His fingers hovered inches from her bare wrist, as if testing the air between them. For a heartbeat, the world held still. Then he touched her. The reaction was immediate. Silver light erupted where their skin met. Brilliant. Blinding. It flared outward in a sharp burst that illuminated the marble floor and gilded columns in stark brilliance. Gasps tore through the hall as nobles stumbled back, shielding their eyes. Mary cried out, not in pain, but in shock, as the heat snapped into clarity. Beneath her skin, a mark ignited. Silver lines spiraled around her wrist in intricate pattern, forming the unmistakable crest of a bonded mate. It shimmered like frost beneath moonlight, vivid and complete. Silence crashed down like a falling blade. No one moved. No one breathed. Twist One settled over the hall in stunned disbelief. The discarded girl was the Alpha King's fated mate. Mary stared at her wrist, chest rising and falling in shallow pulls. The mark pulsed faintly, synchronized with the steady beat of John's heart beneath his coat. He did not release her. "They told you," he said quietly. His voice pitched for her alone, that you were never meant to have a mate. Her throat tightened. "Yes, they were wrong." The words settled into her bones like warmth after winter. For a fleeting moment, relief threatened to surface, dangerous and fragile. But the silence did not feel like celebration. It felt like calculation. A sharp step echoed against marble. The seer moved forward first, gray robes sweeping across the floor. Her pale eyes locked on the glowing mark with undisguised alarm. "Your Majesty," she said carefully, "this is irregular." Mary's father stumbled closer, composure cracking. "There must be confusion. Mary is... This cannot..." John's grip tightened slightly around Mary's hand, not restraining, anchoring. "I have searched 5 years," he said, his voice carrying now. "I have crossed territories, refused alliances, or endured speculation." His gaze swept the council. "The moon did not deny me." He looked back at Mary. She was hidden. A murmur broke across the nobles like wind through dry leaves. Hidden. The word carried weight. The seer's jaw tightened. Mary's father went visibly white. Hidden how? Hidden by whom? Mary's pulse thundered. She had never been hidden. She had been displayed as disappointment, paraded as caution. Unless something had been kept from her. The silver mark glowed brighter, undeniable against her pale skin. The council exchanged tense glances. The political implications spread through the room with chilling speed. A mate bond could not be fabricated, could not be undone, unless legitimacy was questioned. A soft, deliberate sound broke through the murmurs. A single, measured clap. Lillian stepped forward from the crowd, and her crimson gown catching firelight like spilled wine. Her smile was composed, too composed. "Oh," she said lightly, voice carrying with practiced ease. "How extraordinary." Her gaze slid from Mary's glowing wrist to the Alpha King's face. "But perhaps," Lillian continued, eyes gleaming, "there is something His Majesty does not yet know." The hall stilled again, and the thread at Mary's wrist pulsed, no longer just warm. Warning. The thread at Mary's wrist pulsed. Warning. Lillian stepped fully into the open space before the court, crimson skirts whispering over marble. Her expression was composed, almost sympathetic, as though she regretted what she was about to do. "Perhaps," she said smoothly, "His Majesty does not yet know the entirety of Mary's lineage." A ripple passed through the nobles. The seer's gaze sharpened, but Mary's stomach dropped. Lillian turned, addressing the hall with practiced grace. "My cousin's mother," she continued, "was not pure Crescent." The silence tightened. "She was half-human." The word cracked like a whip. A collective recoil shuddered through the room. Not loud, never loud, but visible. Shoulders stiffened. Fans paused mid-air. Eyes widened with something dangerously close to relief. There it is. The flaw. Council members began murmuring at once. Diluted blood. Unstable bonds. No precedent. Mary did not look at them. She looked at her father. He stood rigid, face drained of color. His lips parted slightly, but he did not deny it. That was answer enough. The shame she had buried for years rose like smoke in her chest. Half-blood. Too human for wolves. Too wolf for humans. A compromise no one wanted. She had learned the truth when she was 12, overhearing arguments behind closed doors. Her mother's heritage had been treated like an unfortunate miscalculation, one that required careful management, silence, containment. And now it was being unveiled at the exact moment hope had dared to exist. Mary felt the court's scrutiny sharpen to something cutting. Of course, the moon would not bind its alpha king to diluted blood. Her heart beat hard against her ribs. The silver mark at her wrist flickered, its glow unstable beneath the weight of accusation. She straightened. She would not plead. She would not cry. If rejection came, she would meet it standing. If this ends, she told herself silently, I survive it. She had survived worse. The seer stepped forward, voice measured but edged with triumph. Your Majesty, bonds formed under compromised lineage have historically proven volatile. It would be wise to— A low sound interrupted her. Laughter. Not loud, not cruel, disbelieving. John released a breath that almost resembled amusement and slowly turned his gaze toward the council. Is this your weapon? He asked mildly. Arithmetic? The murmurs faltered. He looked back at Mary, and whatever she expected to see in his expression, doubt, hesitation, calculation, was absent. Instead, there was clarity. I was not crowned because of arithmetic, he said evenly. The words struck the chamber harder than a shout. He stepped closer to Mary, reclaiming her hand deliberately. She endured exclusion, he continued, voice carrying without strain. She survived cruelty. Yet she has stood in this court for years without begging for validation from any of you. The silver mark flared brighter beneath his touch. She never demanded belonging, he added. She simply existed with dignity. The light at Mary's wrist surged. Gasps echoed as the intricate silver pattern expanded, deepening in brilliance. The earlier glow had been a spark. This was a seal. Permanent. Undeniable. The marble beneath their feet reflected the flare in fractured beams of white fire. Gilded columns shimmered. Shadows recoiled. John's grip tightened, not possessive, but resolute. Blood does not determine worth, he said. The words rang through the hall like iron against stone. The moon does. Silence followed, heavy and absolute. The seer lowered her gaze first. Council members shifted uneasily, and their objections dissolving beneath the visible proof of the fully sealed bond. Mary's father swallowed. Slowly, stiffly, he dropped to one knee. The movement was not dramatic. It was not theatrical. It was surrender. A wave followed him. Nobles bowed their heads. Even the seer inclined hers, however reluctantly. Lillian remained standing a heartbeat too long. Her composure cracked, just slightly. Fear flickered across her face before she too bent at the knee, crimson silk pooling around her like spilled wine. Mary stood in the center of it all, light still glowing faintly at her wrist. The girl the moon had passed over, no longer invisible. John released her hand only to turn and address the entire court. His voice did not rise. It did not need to. I claim Mary of Crescent as my queen. The declaration struck like thunder. And nothing in the realm would be the same again. If you love stories where the overlooked rise to power, subscribe, because the best part is still coming. I claim Mary of Crescent as my queen. The words did not fade when the echo died. They settled. Heavy. Irrevocable. Within the hour, the great hall had been transformed from spectacle to ceremony. The chandeliers still burned bright above the black and white marble floor, but the air had changed. What had begun as a harvest convocation had become something far more dangerous. A reckoning. Nobles filled the chamber once more, this time not as eager spectators of pairing rituals, but as witnesses to a precedent being carved into law. At the far end of the hall, twin thrones stood upon a raised dais of white stone veined in silver. For generations only one had been occupied. Tonight, now both stood waiting. Mary remained at the center of the chamber beside John. The silver mate mark at her wrist shimmered faintly, no longer blazing, but undeniably present. It felt different now, not like fire, but like gravity. The seer stood before the assembly, voice steady but tight. "By ancient right," she began, "the Alpha King may formally present his chosen mate before the court for recognition." John did not look at the seer when he spoke. "The bond is sealed," he said. "The moon has chosen." A murmur ran through the nobles, uneasy, restrained. He turned slightly, so that all could see the luminous mark circling Mary's wrist. "This is my mate," he continued, his tone measured but absolute. "Mary of Crescent. She will stand beside me as queen." The word rippled through the hall. Queen. A title that did not belong to a half-blood, but a title that tradition guarded with rigid precision. The seer cleared her throat. "Your Majesty, there remains the matter of lineage law, the blood purity clause." "The clause," John interrupted calmly, "is archaic." Shock flashed openly now. The council members exchanged alarmed glances. One stepped forward, voice strained. "The clause protects the integrity of the throne. It ensures stability. It ensures prejudice," John replied. Silence fell hard. Mary felt every gaze turn toward her. The room was not merely assessing her worth now. It was calculating power. This was the moment. She stepped forward before the seer could respond. The movement was small, but it shifted the air. "If I stand beside you," Mary said, her voice clear and steady, "I stand as equal." The hall stilled. No tremor touched her words. "I will not be symbol or ornament," she continued. "I will not exist as proof of your mercy. If I accept this crown, I accept it with authority." A breath held collectively. She looked at John, not pleading, certain. For one suspended heartbeat, the realm waited to see whether the Alpha King desired obedience more than partnership. John's answer came without hesitation. "Always," he said. "No negotiation, no qualification." The foundation of her authority was laid in that single word. The council, however, was not finished. "We must call a vote," one elder insisted. "The clause cannot be dissolved without consensus." John turned slowly toward them. "You may call it," he said evenly. The vote was taken quickly. Too quickly. Hands rose, murmured objections surfaced. Fear of upheaval outweighed courage. The result was clear. The center of the chamber. The silver crest at the center of the chamber.
At center of the chamber, the silver crest at his back catching firelight. "As Alpha King," he said, his voice resonating through marble and bone alike, "I invoke sovereign authority." The words were older than the council, older than the clause. "I abolish the blood purity clause, effective immediately." The chamber erupted, not in chaos, but in stunned silence so complete it felt violent. Tradition did not bend. It had just been broken. Lillian's composure cracked fully now. She leaned toward a nearby noble, whispering urgently, desperately. John's gaze found her. "Lady Lillian of Crescent," he said, tone almost conversational.
Your talents for rhetoric will be of greater use beyond these walls." Her face drained. "You are hereby appointed diplomatic envoy to the Southern Territories," he continued, "effective at dawn." Exile, wrapped in silk. She bowed because she had no choice. Mary's father remained kneeling from earlier, but now his shoulders had sagged. "Lord Crescent," John said coolly, Your council seat is suspended pending review. The man who had avoided his daughter's gaze all evening lowered his head further. Status inverted. Without further ceremony, John extended his hand to Mary. Together, they ascended the dais. The twin thrones loomed before them, equal in height, equal in design. Mary paused only once before sitting, not from doubt, from recognition. Then she took her place beside the Alpha King, and the realm, whether ready or not, adjusted around its new queen. Spring came softly to the capital. Snow receded from the palace gardens, revealing dark soil and early white blossoms. The great hall no longer buzzed with scandal. It buzzed with petitions. Queen Mary preferred it that way. Months had passed since the night the blood purity clause shattered. The court had expected instability, rebellion, fracture. Instead, it found efficiency. Mary restructured the council within weeks. Seats were no longer inherited automatically. They were reviewed, evaluated, renewed by merit and contribution rather than surname. Several elder members retired with dignity. Others adapted quickly once they understood the shift was permanent. She worked long hours in the strategy chamber, sleeves rolled, ash-gray gowns replaced by tailored court attire edged in silver. The most controversial act came quietly. Mary requested an envoy meeting with the human territories beyond the southern ridge. Whispers resurfaced briefly, half-blood sympathies, some muttered. But when the alliance was signed, opening shared trade corridors and military cooperation, the whispers dimmed. Revenue increased. Border raids decreased. Human merchants arrived under official protection rather than suspicion. The realm prospered. Merit-based appointments brought unexpected faces into power. Scholars from minor houses, captains who had risen from the ranks, advisors selected for intellect rather than lineage. The public began speaking of their queen not as a symbol, but as a strategist. Yet loyalty grew not from spectacle, but from results. In the evenings when the council chambers emptied and torches burned low, Mary sometimes returned to the great hall alone. She would stand at the center of the black and white marble floor and remember the girl pressed against a pillar. The girl who had learned to endure. Footsteps echoed softly behind her one such night. She did not turn. "I thought I might find you here," John said. His presence no longer shifted the air with tension. It steadied it. He approached without ceremony, stopping beside her rather than before her. For a moment, neither spoke. The chandeliers above cast fractured light across the floor. The same hall, the same columns, different story. "You work too late," he said quietly. "So do you." A faint smile curved his mouth. Silence settled between them, not heavy, not strained, familiar. "You were never broken," he said at last. She felt the words more than heard them. Mary looked down at the silver mark circling her wrist. It pulsed faintly, steady, constant. "I know," she replied. And she did. A letter arrived the following week. It bore no seal, no signature, but the handwriting was unmistakable. Careful, restrained, regret, apology, explanation. The words spoke of pressure, of tradition, of fear, of things that should have been said years ago. Mary read it once. Then she folded it neatly and carried it to the hearth in her private chambers. The flame caught quickly. Paper blackened, curled, turned to ash. She did not feel triumph. She felt release. Peace did not require repayment. It required choice. The next morning, she convened council with the same composure as always. Reports were reviewed. Uttered motions passed. Decisions made. Outside, citizens bowed not out of obligation, but respect. They had told her she was never meant to have a mate. Before we close this story, tell me something. Have you ever been told you weren't enough? And if this story moved you, like and subscribe for more stories where destiny chooses the underestimated. The Alpha King broke tradition. The moon broke expectation, and Mary broke the story they had written for her.